Bond. James Bond.
I mean, every kid has a dream, wants to work on a Bond film on some level, so...
You think I'd leave this in the hands of the British?
I'm the first American to ever be an editor on a Bond movie, so bringing me over here and letting me have free reign, which they really did. It was a process of me learning about Lee and his way of doing things. He does a lot of cutting in the camera. He knows what he's doing. He's very focused. And what I try to do is take that footage and make it a little bit stylized.
Christian, my editor, has been cutting it very fast and very progressively modern, and I use that phrase advisedly because I'm always a little hesitant myself about that kind of music video approach to action.
I think one of the things that I like about editing the most is that I like to keep the camera moving as much as possible, because if it's moving all the time and there's a certain flow, for a very long time, I think before MTV came out, the theory behind editing was that the best edited film was a film where you never saw the edits. I think that theory is past gone. You know, I think films like The Matrix and John Woo films and Michael Bay, just it's a flurry. It's a flurry of eye candy. I wanted to bring that kind of editing style into the Bond thing to kind of make it a little bit more hip, I guess is as close as I can get. When I started doing that, you know, this family has been together for 40 years because they had been doing it a certain way for so long. And the new style of editing with the speed ramps and all that stuff, they were a little thrown back. And then when we started putting the movie together and seeing how people were reacting to it, they really, really warmed up to it, and it became a lot of fun.
What we didn't want to end up with was just another car chase where the cars roared along and had squealing tires, and they're on ice, for God's sake. We're going to try and avoid all these cliches. But we're using a device known as speed ramping, which is no stranger to television commercials, music videos, or even some movies now.
This shot was shot at this speed, running across the glacier and then revealing the two cars in the ice. And then they came closer and went out of frame.
You increase and decrease the speed of the film at alarming rates, very fast, very slow, according to however you want to use it. And it's usually to do with music or to do with the pace of things.
It's all very nice and shows geography very well, but it's also very time consuming. So I get ideas like this. So I will high speed across the glacier field, slow down to show what we have going, and then keep it going as fast as possible, just because it's a I'm not a big advocate of cutting just for the sake of cutting. If there's a crane shot that takes, you know, 9 or 10 feet to complete, let it ride out, because it's a beautiful shot. There's no reason to interfere with what I believe was the director's vision of how he wanted that to happen. There's no reason just to cut for cutting's sake, because that just makes for confusion, number one, and number two, it's my feeling of it's a way of getting out of a problem, and if there's no problem in a shot, then why not stay on it? The only science for action editing is story. You'll watch films that have action sequences and there won't be any really story involved, it's just car chase. When I look at the footage, I like to think about what is the reasoning behind why this car went there. This represents a 3 times around chase, which became too long, so we made it 2. We decided that Bond would use his invisible car at this time. So when Zhao started revving up his engine and going, and just as Zhao is about to hit him, he makes it invisible. But before that, you see an insert of metal pegs coming out of the tires, and he rolls up the side of the back of a wall, and Zhao comes off and 40 feet in the air and lands and dies, and the car appears almost vertical on the wall. It reappears and then rolls back down and goes back downstairs again. So that was the death sequence that was come up with way after the beginning of shooting and right towards the end of editing. I find dialogue scenes to be my favorite scenes because it's more old-time filmmaking when there's dialogue going on. So the scene in the hothouse I felt was a lot of fun and really well done.
You never thought of looking inside your own organization?
The Icarus presentation I never really liked because it was just so long and so it was too much going on because they were looking at the presentation. We were up in space. Pierce and Hallie were down looking at other people in the crowd, and there was just too many stories going on, and for that to translate took so long. So what we had to do is we had to get rid of certain parts of the 5 stories that were within the one scene, and it was hard to let some of those go because it was like, well, how is that going to affect it later on? I think the most important thing for me as an editor is when I'm cutting scene 2, I still got to think about scene 185 because how is this going to affect this, and keeping the big picture in my head. Using the Avid is a highly, highly advantageous thing. A, because I can cut with 8 tracks of sound. B, I can have up to 20 layers of video, and there's a sequence in the hospital where Bond is actually meditating himself into a state where he can get his heart rate down, and there was multi-layers of dissolves and things going on, and it was 9 layers of video, and the great thing about that is that before you couldn't see any kind of pre-visualization about what that was going to be like until you sent it to the lab. A week later, maybe you got one of the dissolves back, but here I could do 9 layers of dissolves and cross and do all that stuff. I have never been able to separate my life as far as when I go home, I don't think about editing. That's not true. I always think about it. I'm laying in bed at night and thinking, well, if I just, what if I try this tomorrow? What if I do this? And so it is